All right, so let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 47 in Let's Talk Recruiting. Today we're going to be talking about the sourcing aspect and that outbound recruiting that exists in the corporate recruiting world. If you've had agency experience, it's probably comes secondhand to you. But in corporate recruiting, I kind of see a mixture of processing those that apply and those that do the sourcing piece of it. So our topic today is called Sourcing is the New Recruiting. When I labeled that, I think, well, we've been sourcing for a long time, so is it really new? But I thought it made for a good headline. So I still like to see it keep continuing to grow and get the respect that I think it deserves. So with us today, we have Jay Barrow out of Richmond, Virginia. Michelle, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, BENEFICO? Got it. All right, excellent.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
out of New York City, we have RENDA TERN out of Portland, and we have Justin Baxter out of the East Coast also. So we're bi-coastal today, very interesting. Justin Baxter is out of the DC, Baltimore area. So with that said, we're going to do a sort of a roundtable discussion where we each bring up a key item. But again, it's an open conversation for those in the audience. If you want to add any comments or questions in the chat area, please do so. Panelists, if you can kind of help me keep an eye on that, I appreciate it because quite often I get lost in the conversation. So, Jay, let's sort of jump over to you and with your first item to start with.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit, I guess, a little bit of an intro to me. I've been in the talent acquisition, recruiting, HR space for a little over 20 years now, recruiting in a variety of industries. Most recently, last few years, I've been with Southern States Cooperative, and we're a very large domestic agriculture and energy fuel provider. So not only just products, but also direct on-site services. The types of positions that we recruit for, because we are an internal full house, full life cycle recruiting function. So we recruit everything from our executive leadership all the way down to our hourly workforce to support our retail stores. So it's a complex organization in terms of Southern States is its own C corporation or independent operation, but we have around 50 farming cooperatives that have bought into Southern States from a products and a services and a back office services support. And then we have around 800 to 900 independent dealers. These would be individually owned or family owned, kind of like a franchise setup that we provide additional products and services. So our reach is very, very wide. We hire scientists, sales professionals, marketing, everything you think in a corporate office, but down into agricultural advisors, various CDL drivers, applicators that operate a lot of CDL required farming equipment as well throughout the country.
Excellent. Jay, did you just want to roll into your topic?
Sure. So, in terms from a sourcing perspective, especially in my industry that I'm in with agriculture and energy fuel, a lot of our applicant volume, and qualified applicant volume, they're not, perusing career websites. They're not going to Indeed.com. They're not visiting LinkedIn. Most of the individuals that we're hiring are out in the field, are supporting their customer base, are providing products and additional services. So from a talent acquisition perspective, there is some light, I would say, processing or account management aspects, but it's more proactively sourcing niched professionals to support our sales force, our marketing, our IT, our supply chain, our operational leaders in the field at our agronomy plants, our distribution centers. So for me and my team of recruiters, it's being able to proactively source to strengthen relationships with not only local communities, but Chamber of Commerce, technical schools, and it's not just posting and praying, so to speak, on a community college or a technical school or a university, but actually building relationships with those academic advisors and deans so we can further promote our career paths and our opportunities we have at Southern States and really what the mission, the vision, the spirit, and the value of the organization is all about. So it's that proactive piece that I would say separates, um, you know, a true recruiter from more of a transactional, um, talent acquisition individual there. So in order for, in my mind, in my observation, the sourcing is a critical skill set needed to be successful in agriculture and energy fuel in a industry that's very outward facing and not necessarily kind of um, behind the scene, so to speak.
Jay, do you separate your team between recruiters and sourcers, or are your recruiters are they full life cycle and
It's
cover
full life
everything?
cycle. It's a combination. Yeah, at this point in time, if we grow, my envision, if we continue to grow, is maybe looking at one or two dedicated sourcers. At this point in time, it's a little bit of a jack of all trade, full life cycle at this point with the team.
Given your niche industry, so to speak, you mentioned developing relationships externally.
Mhm.
Is is the TA leader doing that, or the recruiters building and managing those types of external relationships also?
So yeah, it's actually a shared partnership. So myself as a TA leader, with our core universities, not only have I built relationships with the deans of the specific agriculture school, but we've built out what we call, college campus teams or advisory teams that also build relationships with those deans, schedule on-site visits again, kind of pre-COVID, with showcasing Southern States, talking with students. We're going to be rolling out a similar look and feel, but from a virtual perspective there. Um, but and our my recruiting team, based on the regions that they support, also have ownership of building relationships with schools, from high school, technical, and collegiate level, and then also building relationships directly with Chamber of Commerce and the communities where we live and work as well. So it's a holistic shared approach.
Let me ask you this, and this goes for all the panelists also. Uh, Back in the day, I did a lot of work around helping sourcing teams build out programs, and we used to do what we call talent mapping. So it's the
Mhm.
schools, it's the faculty, it's key people in the industry. We would house all that in a tool, like in a CRM. There's quite a few CRMs you can choose from. But when it came to gathering all that information that wasn't applicant data, right? It was sort of industry awareness and knowledge and tracking. Hey, when's the last time I talked to a dean? When's the
Mhm.
last time I talked to an event manager who manages a conference that we would always hit? How are your people kind of collecting information that they get doing sourcing that isn't like specific to applicant flow?
Right. So we actually have a couple of technologies. So there's two in particular that we utilize that it's really has kind of built like a shared service. So one is called Tableau. I mean, you can use it from a reporting perspective, from a competitor analysis perspective, but we really bought the platform so we can input and embed all contacts that we make across not only just competitive contacts, but again, academia, as well as community outreach efforts, and also there in agriculture, there's by state there's cooperative extensions which also help the southern states or the Syngentas or the Bayer Monsantos of the world, so to speak. So there's a huge list there, state by state, that we embed in Tableau. There's another tool we use called Ultrix, and then there's even a more custom platform called Merchant Ag that we use specifically for southern states. It helps us to connect and not only within the enterprise of southern states, but also to leverage partnerships with our 50 member cooperatives and our 900 independent dealers. So it's a constant evolution of embedding of contacts, establishing relationships, and building upon those. So in agriculture and energy fuel, because in energy fuel, we're a distributor mainly. There's a lot of relationships, and I would say untapped markets that we're continuing to go after as well, and leveraging those tools to help pave the way and push us forward.
So to the other panels, what are you using to kind of collect all that information you gather? And I'll throw another caveat into it. Is within sourcing, this I'll use the biotech industry, which is one of the most complex industries I've ever worked in. Uh, there's the research piece of it, and then the sourcing would kind of begin when you start to call the people, right? Try to convert them into people you know. So we would dump what I call the leads, for lack of better words, into the CRM and then source from that versus sourcing from external sites. That's kind of what we would do with our tools. But for the whole panel, what kind of tools do you use to kind of, for lack of better words, collect that information or store that information that you're out there you're gaining, or is it sitting in your Gmail or Outlook? What are your thoughts?
I can say I like you, Sean. We use a CRM, and so we'll use, as I was talking about before we started, we'll use open source intelligence tools to go and scrape as much of the web, deep. We may even do, it could be deep web, may even go deeper than, deep web. Bring all that data in and then house it in the CRM, and then we can aggregate it from there. For both competitive intelligence, we can do talent mapping and obviously source out of various folders and then segment out. If I want, as I was saying, if I want a Cantonese speaking top secret clear data scientist, we may pull in, all these different data scientists from all these other DoD companies or prior military, and then we segment all of that out. So we use a CRM, just like you were saying for biotech, and I have a buddy in biotech. It was the same principle that you were bringing up. Yeah. So
Brenda, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, usually we don't have a CRM tool, so it basically, to your point, Sean, what you mentioned earlier, we have a lot of the data that we're collecting individually sitting probably in a Google Doc that we're just adding to it, and then we share it within the team Slack channel. So whenever we do find market data or competitive intelligence, then we kind of share it with our teams. In prior roles at a different organization, we did use a CRM called Aperture, which actually was pretty user friendly. We use that to build talent communities. We loaded that in with a lot of data, just not on applicants, but just on a variety of different avenues. And so that was a tool that I found that was pretty useful. So having a CRM plus an ATS, I think, is the name of the game here. And so if you have both tools, I think your recruiting teams can be so empowered to have so much data at their fingertips to really dive in and look for good talent, both out of the CRM and out of the ATS.
Yeah, I think that having the CRM plus the ATS is probably the best route, which
Totally.
most companies I don't think have, including the company I work for. We're definitely a combination right now of trying to utilize our ATS, like every function it has, but also keeping a master Google sheet and using a lot of Google Docs. I think we're always open to hearing what other companies are doing in order to manage all that data in one place though. And I don't know that anyone has mastered that yet.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about GDPR. We were primarily US based, so it's not as big as issue as it is, say, in Europe, but we did have to deal with European talent. And what we would do with GDPR is we got legal to sign off on, hey, when we grabbed your information, put it in our database, we had a limited time period that we could work to engage you. And if we didn't convert you or get you to opt into a relationship in that time period, then we'd have to delete you out of the database. And then ironically, you'd start the process the next time they came up again, which I never quite understood it, but that was one way that we dealt with GDPR. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Hey, you got a database for your applicants, you got a database for all that talent. Even when they go through and cycle out, like your silver medalists, that's another great place. They circle back into your CRM. Or those people when you outreach the not now but laters, they're going into your CRM to find out when later is.
Yeah, we built. I was just going to comment. We built out the SharePoint platform as well. So a lot of our technologies, as we're kind of diving in and diving out, a lot of technologies, they all kind of map to SharePoint, so we can load all the data and print it off and be able to run with it.
Is that where your Tableau pulls from? From SharePoint? Oh,
Well, actually,
interesting.
well, Tableau flows into SharePoint, so the SharePoint is actually on the back end.
Gotcha. Oh, interesting. I've never heard Tableau be used other than kind of like a dashboarding tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's evolving, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it definitely has helped us and in many of our markets. Sales and marketing, communications, and then our ag consultative advisory platforms.
Yeah, but my CRM of choice is Salesforce.com. They did buy
Yeah.
Tableau maybe a year or two ago, so it's interesting
Yeah.
to see where they go with it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. Michelle, let's jump over to you. Thank you, Jay.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I'm Michelle. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition at YieldMo, which is an ad tech company based out of New York. I've been an in-house tech recruiter for the better part of the last 10 years, and over that time I've realized that sourcing is definitely the best practice when it comes to finding top talent, especially when it comes to engineers, which is my primary area of expertise. And I'm sure like all of you like me are inundated probably on a daily basis with countless tools like promising us the best candidates. And but I think we all know by now that the best candidates are not actively looking, that we need to go out and creatively source for them. And that also happens to be my favorite part of the recruitment process. So I was excited to join this panel. So anyway, in my experience, like I've worked for large companies like Google, Indeed, to small startups like SpongeCell and now YieldMo. I have a lot of ad tech experience, and I've found that there are like certain pointers that can help you receive a response from candidates, like approximately seven out of 10 times. Like I don't want to say like guaranteed, but like it really depends on how much effort you put in as the recruiter. And in my opinion, that's like a pretty good response rate. Now, I just want to like clarify, like the response is not always going to be like, yes, sign me up. When can I interview? Oftentimes it's more like, thanks for reaching out. This sounds interesting, but I'm not open right now. Let's keep in touch. And that to me is still a win because you just file that away into a folder and you can circle back at a later date, and now they're familiar with you and your organization. So I kind of want to just get into like how do we get these candidates to respond. Hopefully this isn't something like, or I hope you all take something away from this and it's not all like so obvious. The first step is obviously like putting together like what I call a smart search, which means like every candidate that shows up on your search should be a qualified candidate for your role. And I tend to think like a good search should yield about like 150 to 300 results. If it's a lot more, like, you might want to narrow that down. Like the key is like each candidate should be someone you want to reach out to. And the first tip is, I'm sure this is no surprise, but to obtain their personal email address once you found someone that you want to reach out to. Like I love LinkedIn and it's still my primary tool for sourcing, LinkedIn Recruiter, but many candidates, especially engineers, they just don't read emails. There are so many tricks though to go about finding someone's personal email, and there's so many tools now that you can even purchase. That's a whole nother topic that I'd be happy to get into over another panel. I love like going that extra step though and finding their personal email without using those tools. It just is kind of like a fun challenge, and then it's really your best bet in getting your message in front of them. The second tip to getting a response from your sourcing is, and that the subject line to me. Like I try to avoid things like software, we're hiring a software engineer, like a kick-ass startup. Like the subject line is probably the most important part of your message because it determines if they're even going to open up your email. And keep in mind, these candidates are probably getting a ton of messages like this, like every single day. So I found that, many times, like a recruiter, like they don't really read someone's entire LinkedIn profile or even read their whole resume because, you know, who has the time. But when it comes to creative sourcing, I do think it's worth taking the extra few seconds to scroll down to maybe the bottom of their profile where they maybe listed some hobbies or a cool project they worked on independently, maybe even when they were in high school. Or notice like where they went to school, and then it's something like this that you want to mention in your subject line, like maybe they went to a Big Ten football school, so you'll like go Wolverines. I actually don't even know if that's football or Big Ten football.
Michigan.
Okay, yeah, okay, I thought so. Or put in something like your dissertation on artificial intelligence from your freshman year of college, or once I personally even used like Law and Order SVU because someone had that as their one of their interests, and I happen to like that show too. And honestly, while that candidate responded to me, and while we didn't, and he ended up not being a fit, we still emailed today, and that was like 7 years ago, about that show. So it's just about establishing the relationship and getting that response. The third tip is a little more challenging, and that it comes to the content in your email. I think that the key is trying to avoid making it sound as though you're just rewriting the job description into the body. Like having it be like your own voice when it comes to describing what the job is. And I almost try to keep that a little limited to one paragraph. Like obviously you want to know what the job is and the technologies, but I think more importantly, you want to sell the culture, and you want to do that from your perspective, which also should come from your voice. Like so, for example, recently my company Yilmo, I share in my reach out to candidates like what I love right now is that how much Yilmo cares about its employees, especially during this pandemic. Like recently, we just rolled out a mandatory 2 me days, which is on top of our unlimited PTO, where we are each required to take 2 days off every single month since COVID to make sure we're taking care of ourselves and our mental health. And the job is the job. Like you explain what that is, but a candidate will be into it or not. But you also have an opportunity in these emails to sell your company and culture, and that's what can set your message apart, I think, from other recruiter emails. And on top of this, like I think there's like just a couple of other things that you can do to help get that response rate up. One is the second follow-up email. You spend so much time finding that ideal candidate and familiarizing yourself with their profile and then crafting that personal email. If you didn't get a response right away, like you don't want that hard work to go to waste. Like I get most of my responses from that second email, which I just simply replied the first one, like usually like a week after I sent it. And a quick like, hey, I just want to make sure you saw my message. And that usually is when I get the most of my responses. And then lastly, thinking about when you're sending these messages. Like I found that sending emails like in the evenings when you're not at work, over the weekends, and like specifically Sunday nights and like even Monday mornings. I like to think maybe because nobody really likes Monday mornings at work, they might be open to entertaining another job. But anyway, yeah, these are just like some tips that I've found. Like if you follow, you should see like a huge increase in your response rates from your sourcing. I'm happy to go into more detail on any of these things or just creative Boolean searches in general. If you wanted to reach out to me directly, or I don't know if anyone had any questions, but
Michelle, do you have like a go-to subject line? Like that just works the best?
If I had to choose like a go-to, it would probably be like the most straightforward. And I also like a lot of this is based on someone's LinkedIn profile. You can get a lot of their personality from that. I just, the go-to could be senior software engineer at, and put the company name, and keep it almost simple. If you don't have the time to go, to take the extra step of putting something personal to their profile, but I highly recommend the personal. Otherwise, keeping it very straightforward and clean. Engineering leader at Yieldmo, CTO at Yieldmo, New York City, if that matters, and because then, like, all right, they know what they're expecting, and if they're open to it, then they'll open it.
So kind of best practice, not an absolute, of course, but get that job title name in there and the company name in the subject line, which
Yes, if you're not going to put something personal to them in the subject line, then yes.
Is the majority of your emails, are they singles, right? So you're customizing
Yeah.
each email account? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a team of sourcers and recruiters as well, and one of my sourcers have been really successful, most recently actually personalizing every single email. And so the responses that she's gotten back is great. And these are people that she's reaching out to from at LinkedIn, since LinkedIn had a huge rip just recently. And at LinkedIn, they're professionals at this. And so to get responses back that, hey, great email, this is what I try to teach our clients to do, to personalize emails so that we can reach back out. So the response rates have been skyrocketed. And sometimes even though they're not actively looking, they're open to a conversation just because my sourcer went the extra mile to put in that extra effort to personalize it to each individual, which they truly do appreciate. So personalization is key.
Yeah, I agree with Brenda and Michelle, especially when we're dealing with folks in my industry who are security cleared. They're already more paranoid. So getting something that could look like a spamming email or a phishing email, they're just going to click delete. They're not even going to open it. So, like Michelle was talking about making it personalized, I think looking, some of these guys and gals that we go after have patents. They're out there and they actually have published articles. So she was mentioning hobbies mentioned in LinkedIn. If there's anything that they have published or repos on GitHub or things of that nature, I'll incorporate that and my team will incorporate that into the subject line and also into the email. So we'll reference something that's really personal to them and they'll be like, wow, you took the time to look at my patent or some article or something I published. So I like the thing with the Wolverines, and that probably works for some populations, but also the scientific populations that we go after, we'll look at like published articles and patents and things like that. So whatever we can do to get their attention. But I totally agree with Brenda and Michelle. I think the more personalized you can be, you're going to up not just your percentage of response, but your connection with that individual. So we do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with all three. The other thing I was going to add, like in the subject heading, because we wanted to, of course, increase our response, our ROI, and so when our industry is very, helping your neighbor oriented. So in the subject, we put networking as well. In that, with the company, the position, the location, and in parentheses, networking. And we saw an increase in response like, hey, I'm not interested. I'm glad we connected, but I know X, Y, and Z that would like to talk with you. So that's been a great, ad for us from an ROI perspective.
Yeah, I want to kind of emphasize one thing that Michelle said about, I call it conversion, right? The ability to convert those we don't know to people we do know. Whether it's I'm interested response or a non-interested response, I am all for that. And to me, that's the ability to convert those we don't know to those we know is like a sign of a really good sourcer, and it shows that time and effort is needed to get them to engage back with you. Because once they converse with you back, now you can follow up in the future. Quick question for everybody around sourcing piece of it, and kind of that negative, or I'll call it a neutral response. A negative responses, I'll never work for you. Neutral responses like not now. How did you, when you're outbound recruiting, how do you handle, I call them the not nows but later? The way I used to do it is if they would say not now but later, I would want to follow up. Well, when is it in December? Or is it in June? Now I have 12 buckets. Right? I use CRM, so I use a campaign. If they said call me back in October, I put them in the October campaign. If they said January, I put them in the January campaign. So when that month comes around, I already got a relationship with them. I'm sending off a short mass email because we have that relationship. Say, hey, you told me to follow up with you in October. Do you have time to talk? And that worked like a charm, that follow up, and I didn't have to remember every single person. But to everybody else, how are you kind of managing those not now but laters? What are you literally doing with those people and that information?
Yeah. So I'm just looking at a comment from April's top funnel. I was going to say is a tool that we use that I was mentioning earlier for drip campaigns. So for folks who say not now but later, then we add them to a campaign that will be automated emails that will follow up with them every whatever cadence that you put on. So it could be every 3 months, every 6 months. So you can always drop them into top funnel and make sure that it follows up. Even with candidates who you reach out to via LinkedIn, there is a simple drop in that if they don't respond back to you, you can refer back and drop them all into top funnel. And again, on a nurture drip campaign, if they respond, then there's an AI bot that actually will help you schedule an interview onto your calendar. But if they don't respond, then you can do 3, 4, 5 follow-up emails on a kind of a weekly, like 7 or 10 day kind of cadence to ensure that none of the candidates who you're reaching out to are falling between the cracks.
Go ahead, Brenda. I know that was going to be your item that you wanted to talk to. Did you want to go a little bit more in depth around what drip campaigns are, and just kind of explain what it is if somebody doesn't know what a drip campaign is?
Drip campaigns are just basically a great way of or methodology to keep following up with candidates who don't respond back to you in a timely manner. Like we have Lever as our ETS, and they also have a different tool there called Lever Nurture, which is very similar to Top Photo, but I think Top Photo is actually more user friendly, and we can create several different campaigns. So let's say for my team, I manage a sales recruiting team at Udemy, and we support the B2B side of the business. We recruit for a lot of sales roles. Like for example, we have to fill about 100 roles by end of year. And so for those, I mean, we're always constantly doing a lot of high volume. So when we reach out to candidates, if they're not responding back, I have a team of sourcers, a team of recruiters who will put and create these kind of sales nurture campaigns that they will drop everyone into the actual campaign if they haven't gotten a response back within, like, let's say a week or two. And from that point on, it kind of automates everything so that you don't have to go back to LinkedIn recruiters and, oh, which person didn't respond back? And that's such a manual process, whereas Top Funnel makes everything automated.
So then if somebody responds in a positive way, hey, let's talk, or I'm going to apply to a job, they're then taken out of that drip campaign automatically.
Exactly, it's the opposite. Yeah, so depending upon, because there's a lot of AI technology behind it, so depending upon the response, then it will kind of kick them off to the next step of the process. So for example, if someone responds to Deliver or to a Top Funnel campaign, then they say, oh yeah, I'm interested in finding out more. Then again, there's an AI bot that will actually help you schedule an actual interview onto your calendar so that you don't have to do anything and that it'll just pop into your whatever calendar that you're using.
And do you change up your content of the drip campaigns depending upon
Yeah,
what role
you
that
do.
person is?
It can also be personalized. And so they say, hey, your experience at XYZ company looks great for this particular role. So you can customize it and you can personalize each different email that is sent. So the second email can be different from your third email. Third emails are different from your fourth emails. But I think, nurture campaigns are so important. It's kind of like in a sales process where you have to nurture the relationship. Kind of the same concept.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose of my 12 campaign buckets. If they're just all in there. Okay, so excellent. Drip campaigns, and that is built inside the Lever ATS, or are we still
Lever
talking?
Lever has functionality on it, but Top Funnel is a different tool that we purchase on top of that. Our sourcing team has found more kind of more usability to it. So that's one tool that we found that has been really nice.
Interesting. To the rest of the panels, managing those not now but later's, what are your thoughts around that? I sure like the concept of a drip campaign because it seems easy. I just need to, I'm hoping it's a click and drag or click and drop and drag. I'm sorry, yeah, drop and drag. What are your thoughts around those managing those not now but later's?
Yeah, so at Southern States, what we have are basically we've created what we call talent folders, and we kind of put them into, buckets of what their, career aspirations or experience might be, ag related, operations, sales, etc. And then it is within our platform, it is automated to sending out, a monthly or quarterly or 4 or 5 months. I mean, we can get very granular, but it feeds it out. And very similar to Brenda, from a communication standpoint, we can customize it as well to send out to the masses. And so, I mean, that's been a huge opportunities. Again, we've hired a lot of not now but later. Actually, an ag finance marketing specialist. He just joined us a month ago, and I connected with him a year and a half ago. So it definitely works to stay consistently, not kind of continue to poach, but just building that relationship and connecting at that right time.
Justin and Michelle, anything on non-eligible leaders?
Yeah, I can. We have folders like Jay, so similar. I think similar in practice. I like all of my sourcers on my team to ask, well, what are your, basically get their anchors or motivations on why not now. So we don't take the first no. We're gonna we're gonna try to push, and if they say, well, my wife's having a baby, maybe in 3 months, I'll be in a better position. We'll take those notes, whatever personal information, we put that in the CRM so we can then have that information. So when we revisit, that individual 3 months from now and say, hey, how's the baby doing? That's very, they're like, wow, you remember that? It's like, well, it's in my CRM. We don't go into all, but yeah, hey, Bobby, I just want to see where you're at with that, the newborn. I bet you're not getting a lot of sleep. So I think the more personal data that we can pull on the reasons why not now, so that we can come back and try to close them, right? So always closing. And also, I don't ever want to take the first no. So if they say not now, but later, I'm going to ask, why not now? And what can I incentivize you, sign on bonus or things like that, that might be able to make it now, right? So we're pretty, I'd say pretty assertive, aggressive in that. But, we do the same thing Jay does in terms of using folders and segmenting out from there. So, but I really like Brenda's. I'm going to check out Top Funnel because that sounds really cool. And so that, I mean, we might incorporate something like that. I'm gonna take a look at that, but that's how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much use like a folder, and if it's like a really strong candidate, I put reminders in my calendar, because like I'm definitely more quality over quantity. Like it's not too difficult for me to throw like a reminder in my calendar and in 2 months reach out to so and so. If I was dealing, but that's engineering. If I was dealing with maybe sales, something like that, it's probably worth having a more organized tool to stay in touch. It probably is still actually though worth looking into. But as of right now, again, still pretty basic. I go back and just check my folders when I've had the time, or if it's someone I put in my calendar, then of course it pops up.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was working with a sourcing team where I would go out and build my target list, and this was all around developers and software engineers, mainly in the New York area and the Boston. But I would build out my target list, put it in a Google spreadsheet. Michelle, to your point, I assigned my research team, hey, go find the email address for these people. And it was by far Gmail addresses. So the little tricks of determining and finding the Gmail. They populate that shared spreadsheet because this was overseas outsourcing. And they filled it in there, and then I would take those, and we used a tool called Outreach.io. It's primarily a sales tool, but it would start, to Brenda's point, in like a top funnel, it would start that drip campaign. What I would find is, and every time we reached out to them, we called it a touch. So we would do a 1-2 punch on each touch. So I'd send an email on Tuesday, and then either on Friday or the following Monday, it would be a follow-up punch, right? The 1-2 punch. And that would together would be a touch. And we'd run a series of touches, like one every 2 months, once every 2 months, or one every 3 months. And then we just let it ride. But if you got to that fourth or fifth touch, I was never converting you. The drop off on conversion just went zoom. So it was almost like I understand you're busy and you may not get to it, but after that third punch, maybe four, yeah, you're just not interested in what I got. So then we note that and remove them from our list. But to be able to have that kind of engine behind the scenes, it worked pretty good. Keep a steady flow of candidates coming through without pissing off too many people with too many emails and stuff all at once. All right, excellent. Justin, so let's jump over to your item.
Yeah, I was just talking about kind of the new wave of sourcing. We have all the automation and AI everywhere, and kind of what's going to be left, right, after the bots have taken over TA. And I think what we're seeing is really what's left is the creative recruiter sourcer who can, man the bot, bootstrap, do data scraping. Sean had a research team for him. Well, they can do some of their own research. They're a marketer. They can sell. Maybe they create their own automated tool. Maybe they dabble in Python and they do some data scraping. but they can also close, so I think where TA is going, small, medium size, certainly large organizations like mine are going to have a plethora of tools, right? But if you're in a smaller, mid-sized company, you may not have that. So, what's going to be the most powerful recruiter, sourcer, or whatever you want to call them? But it's going to be the new age recruiter who can do all of these things, right? Can automate, can set up a drip campaign, can sell, can strategize with clients, and it's really, how I look at it. It's I call them a full stack sourcer or a full stack recruiter, much like we would say a full stack developer. Because you have TA, you have back end, which is considered sourcing traditionally, and then you have front end, which is like the client facing recruiter. I'm going to hold the manager's hand. I'm going to do the client management. I think somebody who can do both, do some data scraping, run a bot, run a drip campaign, that's going to be I think that's going to be the impetus to keep that person hired when bots are slowly doing all the other mundane TA tasks, onboarding, offers, scheduling. All of that is going to go the way of automation, right? That's inevitable. The larger companies will do it first. Mid-sized, smaller, they may not have the money to get some of the larger enterprise tools, but even then, eventually that's where everything's going. So how do you keep your skills current? I think, being not a bot, being having strong interpersonal skills like Michelle, talking about personalized messaging, Jay and Brenda talking about strategy with drip campaigns, and he's doing a lot of building of relationships with these other organizations within agriculture and things like that. Bots can't do that. They can't think creatively in that respect. But that's really the future of where we'll call it sourcing, but sourcing, recruiting, and I think keeping your skills current to be that holistic kind of best athlete recruiter. That's where you need to be, because otherwise the bots are coming. I know it sounds scary, but it's like Terminator's coming. So we just got to be ready. But I mean, that was my main topic. So I manage a team of 15 sourcers. I'm 12, 13 years in aerospace and defense. We use a plethora of tools. We have a CRM and ATS. We have some homegrown stuff. I've created my own automation tool on the side that I sell and I've used, and we have to do a lot, because we basically recruit people that don't want to be recruited generally. They're security cleared, or prior military or current military. They could be in the intelligence community. They could be undercover, things of that nature. So we support law enforcement. We support 3-letter agencies, but we also support like helping support with COVID-19. We're doing stuff where we're recruiting people to deal with the supply chain to send ventilators to hospitals and things like that. So, I feel that noble mission. So you want to connect that mission with, your subject line and the way you're sourcing and the way you're outreaching, because, we want to save lives with some of the things. Some of the people we recruit will end up saving lives. But again, my main topic was just the future of where TA is going and sourcing as a whole. And, as we're seeing these bots creep into every aspect of the life cycle, what is going to be left? And it's going to be, that creative aspect, that Michelle's talking about and Brent's talking about in the outreach, but eventually, automation tools are now saying, here's a great way to outreach to this candidate. So eventually you're going to get to a point where they're doing social analytics, right? So they're bringing in a social analytics score of that candidate based on all their postings on social media and how, personality types, and then evaluating them and then feeding back to you through the AI. Hey, this is how, what you should say to this guy, what makes him tick. He's, XYZ, these are, some hobbies, and it will all be pieced together. And essentially it's social engineering is what we would term in the hacking community. And then you go and outreach, and maybe you outreach to him through text. Maybe you outreach to him through a different social channel than LinkedIn, because maybe him or her is more responsive based on the AI, based on that specific social channel, right? Like maybe he doesn't respond to LinkedIn, but what we know is he's super active on GitHub. Well, it'll say, here's his GitHub profile, here's his repos, and by the way, reach out to him on Twitter, DM him on Twitter. He will definitely respond to you. So I think that's where it's going to go. It's highly invasive, but it's inevitable. 3-5 years, maybe less. We're getting there with various tools. I mean, I can talk about tools for hours, but I know there's a lot there, Sean, but
Yes.
that was my main topic.
Yes. So Justin, you mentioned that you manage a team of 15 sourcers, and I've worked
Yeah.
a lot of times supporting teams of sourcers. When people
Yes,
registered
sir.
for this event, I asked, how much time do you spend sourcing? And on average, it was 40%, right? So, and everything that you just rattled through was like, man, that's a full-time job 5 times over. So getting back into recruiters that are doing full life cycle, to me, is typically a victim of circumstance, meaning budget.
Yeah.
That's what you have budget for, so that's what we get.
Yeah.
Are we seeing, and this is for all panelists, are we seeing a trend to dedicated sourcers? I think we've been asking that question for a decade. It still seems to be, I don't see a big increase in dedicated sourcers at companies. It's 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's full life cycle for people. And when you get into those hard to find positions, that's tough, right? Because you got to keep filling those recs, and you start to look at unreviewed rates because you're not reviewing the applicants because you're sourcing because the quality of applicants that come through isn't high quality. So you don't want to waste time going through all the applicants. So I'd rather go cold source rather than go through my applicants. So there's all these moving variables. But for the group, are we trying to get to dedicated sourcers, or are we can just hold steady where we've been? I think we've been holding steady for the last 10 years at it. What are your thoughts?
We're at Udemy, we actually have dedicated sourcers. So we have a team of 5 sourcers. I have 2 on my team, and then on the tech side, there's 3. So that model has worked really well, where I pair a sourcer with a recruiter. So it's a dual partnership, especially on high volume roles or just difficult to fill type of roles. But the expectation for my team is that every recruiter is a sourcer, first and foremost. That's where you get the bulk of your experience, and it's an element and fundamental that every recruiter should be strong at. To be a successful recruiter, in my opinion, is to understand Boolean searches and sourcing and doing Google X-ray sourcing and all of that. So that model has worked really well for us, and we actually just implemented that sourcing and recruiting model probably about a year ago. So I think having dedicated sourcers is also a key element to a recruiting team. But depending upon the size of the organization and whatnot, it may or may not work. But that's kind of my philosophy around recruiting and sourcing.
Jay or Michelle?
Yeah, my thoughts on that is kind of a balanced blend. So, from what Justin said in terms of your recruiters having, I guess lack of better words, a jack of all trades. You are you're very skilled in relationship building, client management, and you have a passion for sourcing. So you can roll your sleeves up and being proactive. I think where it turns a tide is based on how large your organization and how large your volume from a recruiting standpoint. Southern States Cooperative, we are a large entity. Our volume isn't quite as large as I would expect to add a dedicated 100% sourcer. So my team is a blend of a jack of all trade, talent acquisition specialist. But if we got, I'd say, another 300 to 500 requisition volume, I would probably add in at least 2 dedicated 100% sourcers, and they're going to support, probably 3 to 4 recruiters on either end, based on our demographic there. So I think part of it is also looking at the size of your business and your volume as well to justify and dictate what your talent acquisition framework should look like.
Yeah, I agree with that, and what Brenda said as well. It depends on the size of the company, how discerning you are with the types of candidates you hire. I think a lot of the people, when you asked that question, Sean, like, I saw a lot of responses from the attendees, like they don't have enough time to source. So I fully support the sourcing model tied with a recruiter. If you have a lot of hiring, I love sourcing, and I pretty much am like a one-person team, got my small company, and so I'm doing full life cycle recruiting, but I also do a lot of other branding and recruitment events and stuff like that. I don't have enough time to source, so having a dedicated sourcer, I think, is a great way to go if hiring is a priority for your company.
Yeah. Sean, I can say for aerospace and defense, I mean, we were just talking about Marvin at Lockheed. Every major aerospace and defense company has a formidable sourcing team. I know most of them. So because of the nature of we have to go after security cleared candidates. We can't just go on LinkedIn and InMail or do drip campaigns only. So by nature, because of the competitiveness and the size of the organizations, even mid-size integrators in my industry have sourcing teams. They could be 5 to 6, but generally it's pretty standard, right?
You're trying to say you don't share with your buddies over at the other competitor? Yeah,
no. Marvin and Dean don't play nice with me. So
yeah, I've had a conversation with the recruiter. He worked for the government. I can't remember which division. But once he got somebody to get that clearance and that ready to go, even if he didn't have a position, they would sit on him, let's say with the NSA. But the FBI needed somebody. They're not sharing, they're sitting on them because they work so hard to get them to that spot. They're just going to hold till they got a position for themselves. So even in the team, there's this possessiveness around sourcing. To me, it speaks to the value of getting those people.
It's very competitive.
There's one question in the comments, and there's a lot of chat going on. I'm not even close to being able to keep up with that. But it was about, hey, what do you talk about when there's nothing to talk about? Meaning you don't have a job position for them. And I'm paraphrasing. And this goes back to the drip campaigns and staying in touch. One thing that worked like a charm for me, it's kind of a moot point here in 2020, was events. If I knew of an event or a conference that going on, I could put that to all my targeted pipelines that were around that event. That was a great way to stay in touch, whether or not you were going to the event or not. It's just, hey, I'm letting my developer network know, see if you guys are going to this event, just checking in. That was a great short to the point, letting them know. Odds are they probably knew about it. Odds are they probably were not going. But that touch point to see if they respond back, to see if your open rates are there. Events work like a charm. The holiday season was always a must do at the end of the year. A little brief emailer about people and stuff like that. I will say one of my follow-ups, like we would put pipelines or buckets or folders, whatever you want to call it. I always would go 2 levels of definition. So for recruiters, you would be HR recruiters compared to HR business partners. And having those 2 levels of definition allowed me to engage with contextual content, meaning it related to you. Anything higher, it was too generic. Anything lower, it almost got too hard to manage, even though sometimes you have to go a little bit deeper in detail. As far as delivering content, I go to those 2 levels of specific content to that group of people. Well, hey, we went the great conversation, lots of chat coming through. That was excellent. And I know some people probably wanted to get into Boolean and all that, but to Michelle's point, that would be a whole other session. We could go for hours on that, Justin too. Any final comments or thoughts around sourcing as a key part of our profession? I'm going to kind of do a little circle here. Brenda, you're at the top of my screen. So let's start with you.
Yeah, I think sourcing is a huge element to the overall recruiting process. It's something and a function that will always be super important. And to kind of revert back to the chats that are going on, like I don't see sourcing as a lower level role to recruiting. It's a dual partnership. They share the responsibility of finding tough talent, and in this market, it's highly competitive. So having a strong recruiter who knows how to source, or having a dedicated sourcer, in my opinion, is really key to the success of a recruiting team. And I truly believe that sourcers' roles, if you have a sourcer, is probably the most difficult role out there, in my opinion, in addition to what the recruiters have to do in managing the client side of the business and whatnot. So I think that, sourcing long term is going to be an element of recruiting that will always have to be a function, whether if your recruiter is doing it or if you have a dedicated sourcing team.
Jay, let's go to you.
Yeah, I echo Brenda's comments. You know, from a sourcer perspective, definitely don't see it being a lower level role. It's definitely, I think, a strategic business partner with your different divisions and helping those organizations grow and and continue to take 1, 2, 3 steps forward there. So I certainly see it here to stay. I don't see it kind of having less precedence as automation or AI and robots, become more preventable.
And Michelle?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I mentioned, like we get, so many emails of all these tools that I'm sure are mostly bots, and the personal interaction that comes with sourcing is never going to go away as long as we are people, especially I think as we are in now this remote world. So I will consistently I like change. I think it's good, but I have done a lot of the things that I've been doing when it comes to sourcing for the past 10 years. They still work, and I just kind of build upon them. So I think that it is, it's here to stay. I think I missed the initial question, but I think.
No, you got it. Just to follow. And then Justin, let's roll to you. And I know you're a diehard bots guy, but I'm with Michelle on this one. I'm still waiting for him to arrive.
I mean, I'm biased. No, I'm saying that as a direct result of the bots, what's left will be those with a strong interpersonal skill set who are highly creative, who can run a bot, run some of the automation tools, do a drip campaign, do marketing. So for me, obviously I'm biased because I run a sourcing team and I've been doing it for a while, but it's not going away. And a really good sourcer to your business development team as well, gathering competitive intelligence. There's so many other things. I see messages from somebody around research. The sourcer can do research. They should be able to sell. They should be able to close, and they should be able to do client management. We do all three. So I don't think it's going away. In fact, I think the cream of the crop sourcers will, rise to the top as AI and automation becomes more prevalent. So, if that's full life cycle recruiter who's doing some sourcing, or a peer sourcer or whatever combination, but it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So final note.
I got little kids, so hopefully we still have jobs.
If anybody wants to watch a good documentary on YouTube, it's called AlphaGo. It's made by a company called DeepMind, which Google bought. They're an AI. If you ever heard of the game called Go? It's the computer. They beat the top humans in it, but it's a really critical thinking game. So AlphaGo, I watched it like 4 times because I just find it so fascinating. But if you're into AI or bots or anything like that, or how can computers think, watch that YouTube documentary. It's free, of course. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much. Another great conversation. Appreciate everybody's time. I'll end up copying and pasting the chat just when I get this up on the website because there's just so much of it, which is fantastic. So with that said, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of your week. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sean.